Hey, welcome everybody to my live stream. I'm going to be sewing a throw pillow with an invisible zipper next to welting. So before we start, I just want to introduce some special guests that I have here today. First one, this is Miguel Angel. He's going to be sitting over by the window. There we go. And our second special guest today is Javier. He's also going to be sitting over by the window. All right. So, okay, let's, I'll show you what we have for materials first, I guess. Stuff over. So I'm making a 20-inch pillow. So because it's a 20-inch pillow, you can see here, this is cut to 21 by 21 in order to allow for half-inch seam allowance on each side. And then we have two strips here. We're going to use these. These are just cut. Normally you want to cut them on the bias, but in this case I didn't have enough fabric, so they're not cut on the bias. These are 2-inch wide by whatever the length of the fabric was, like 54 or something. And then I have a 24-inch zipper, and the zipper is obviously bigger than the pillow, and I'll show you why when we get to that point. And then of course some cable cord. This is 1/8 inch cable cord. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to make some piping. Once we make the piping, then the next step will be to attach the piping. Then we're going to attach a zipper, and then we're going to close the pillow. So before I get into that, before we start sewing, I just want to mention, oh, you know what? Actually, I'm going to show you a finished product of what we're making. So this is what the pillow looks like. This is a 20-inch pillow, same thing, same fabric. And here I'll just switch again to this one. So you can see this is what it looks like. Here's the invisible zipper, and then the piping on each end. So that's what we're going to make. But in order to get to this, one of the things I never really see people talk about in sewing videos is about testing stuff. So you're going to see that I'm just going to get to the machine. I'm going to start sewing right away. Doesn't usually happen like that. You got to really test everything. And here we go. So you can see here I have some samples that I sewed on some piping. I tested, like, what did I test? I wanted to make sure that it was going to stay the same length. I wanted to overlock it, test this overlock stitches, just test everything, right? Test the stitches and stuff. So sewing's not really something you just sit down at the sewing machine and just, put the pedal to the metal and start going. You got to really test everything. So just because you see me doing it doesn't mean that it didn't happen already, right? So we'll get on to sewing the binding, which will be the first, that'll be the first step of what we do. All right, so actually, I'm gonna go back to this one. So the first thing we're going to do with this is I need to make one continuous strip. So what I'm going to do is I'll get these pieces out of the way, get this stuff out of the way, and see better. Very simple. Just going to take the binding and sew it on an angle. And That way we can just make a continuous strip. So I'm just going to sew an angle here when we get to the machine, and then we'll have just one long strip, and then after that we'll I'm going to put in the cable cord to make the binding. Okay. Done. First step, very easy. Sorry, I had set up a whole bunch of keyboard shortcuts to switch to these different cameras, and last minute software's acting up. It doesn't want to switch for some reason. It doesn't want to listen to the keyboard shortcuts. Okay, so we have this strip here, and I'm just going to press it open with my finger. You don't need to iron it for this. I mean, you could, but there. Now we have one continuous strip that's joined on an angle. And now we can get to sewing in our cable cord into the into this thing here. So we'll go back to the sewing machine and start doing that. Where was it? My iPhone. Get this off. So switch this foot to this one. So I'm not going to start at the very end. I want to leave a gap. And the reason for that is because when I'm attaching both ends, it makes it a lot easier if it's not attached. So I'm going to start a bit, just a ways down, like around here. Nothing complicated. Put this on the floor. So I'm just trying to keep the edges even. by little, halfway point. Just hold this down. This is the easy part, but in reality, a lot of this pillow is, it's nothing tricky about it. It's all easy. Just gotta go slow, take your time, line things up. And again, I'm going to leave the end. The end doesn't really matter. I'm going to use the whole thing anyway, so leave the end open. So go back to the table. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to cut this. This cable, get rid of this cable cord. Get it out of the way. Right, and so that's it for the piping. Now, I mentioned that I had cut it at 2 inches wide. And the reason that I did that is because I want the width of this with my seam allowance to be exactly 1/2 inch. But a lot of times when you sew it, like you can see here, sometimes it doesn't sew, like the edges aren't exactly perfect. You can kind of, miss it a little bit. Like I didn't do it too bad here. This is actually pretty good. There's some parts that, even be like the cutting before, right? They don't line up 100%, right? Being very, very picky. But anyways, sometimes it's when you're doing like super, super long piping, it can get worse and worse and worse over time because you're just doing it really quick. So what I like to do is I like to cut it bigger than I need it, wider than I need it, and then I'll come in after and I'll trim it exactly to the seam allowance that I need or that I want. It just helps the whole process later on with the pillow just go a lot quicker. So I'll just take a rotary cutter and cut this down all the way down the whole thing to make sure it's exactly 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch wide. Scissors. So I'm just trying to butt up the ruler right up against the piping, which is on this side here, the piping, so that I can get this exactly 1/2 inch. Again, nothing complicated, nothing difficult about it. But this step, if you do this step, like, I know there are ways to make piping to get it exactly the width, like the finished width. I could have started with a different width. I have a calculator that I made, like a spreadsheet that calculates exactly what width of strips I need in order to get the right size of binding. But I just find that sometimes, like when you, for this anyway, because I want the pillows to, I just want it to be really quick, the assembly of it. So I just find it's a lot easier to trim it down a ½ inch. And you'll see why when I'm sewing the piping onto the pillow, that it makes the whole process go a lot quicker. But less exact if your piping isn't exact. So it just kind of, I'm not using seam guides. I don't need to use seam guides because I can be sure that this piping is exactly ½ inch the whole way through. So whatever time I'm using up right now, I save way more down the road when I'm actually sewing this to the pillow. It's like everything in sewing, depending on how much you do for setup and how much work you do in advance, well, makes it easier down the road. If you want to just sit at the machine and do everything at the machine, then probably be here for a long time and then not too happy with the results. It's all about preparation and getting stuff ready in advance. Not the most exciting thing to watch somebody just use a rotary cutter over and over. But hey, it's live. Okay, there we go. Now we know that this piping is exactly ½ inch. So that's it for the piping. Just need to attach it now to the pillow. So get stuff out of the way. And before we do that, I'm gonna show you with this fabric here. So this is the wrong side of the fabric. You can see, maybe you can see on here, I have an arrow. So it points up, so I know that my zipper is going to come along this side. So I'm going to turn it the other way. Actually, I'm going to mark this here so I don't get confused, because what I want is to put it this way so you can see a lot easier. Right? I'm used to working with like the zipper on this side, but for the video, so you can see it, I'm going to work with the zipper on that side. But before we worry about the zipper, when you sew a throw pillow and you attach piping to a throw pillow, here, I'll show you on this corner here. A lot of the time you can go like, you can make a perfect corner, right? You just pivot and you can get this exactly perfect corner. But the problem when you do that with a throw pillow is that when you stuff the pillow, what ends up happening is it's very difficult for all of the stuffing to get up into that corner. So it ends up looking what people call like dog ears, right? The pillow looks like it's got ears rather than looking like it doesn't actually look square. So in order to make a pillow actually look square, the trick is you got to round the corners, right? So if you round the corners, it helps the stuffing get in there. And even though you think it's gonna, it looks before you put the stuffing in there like it's got a rounded corner, when you actually fill it and you get the pillow all together, it actually looks perfectly square. So the trick is when you're making a throw pillow not to sew straight corners, but to sew a curve. Now the problem with sewing a curve is that when you're sewing a curve, there's so many things that you can make there's so many different ways you can sew a curve, right? You can sew it a little bit longer on one side than the other. You can sew it perfectly round. So it's kind of, and especially when you sit down at the machine and you try to do it, it's not, you don't really guarantee that you're going to get good results when you do that. I think there's comments in here and I just can't scroll down to see them. Oh, I'm seeing some comments down there, but I can't see it. So actually, before I move on, I'm going to try to open yeah, I'm going to open this here and see the comments this way. Sorry, I didn't mean to be ignoring people's messages, but looks like some people have been huh. Why I can't scroll up to see the messages. Yeah, Frank's Pizza House says, good afternoon, great setup. Okay. All right, well, I think there's another comment down below, but I can't actually see it. It's not letting me scroll. Let's see. Top chat. No. Live chat. No, I can't see it. Anyways, going back to this, sorry about that. So we're going to round the corners, but in order to round the corners perfectly, I've actually created this template. All I did was just go on the computer, take a piece of paper, take a square, put in a square, and get a rounded square, put it inside, cut it out. Not a big deal. I just use it here so that I can mark a rounded corner, and that way I'm sure that every single rounded corner on the pillow is exactly the same corner radius, basically. And it just helps when I'm sitting at the sewing machine to be able to see that. So this is a heat erasable pen, so don't have to worry about these marks showing up. You just need a little bit of like a blast of steam from the iron, and all this pen will come out. But really, you shouldn't have to, because you're probably going to sew over top of it. It won't even be visible. There we go. Okay, there we go. So we got our corners marked. And just going to attach this. So because of the way we're attaching this, we're going to have a join, obviously. I don't want the join to be close to the top, because that's the top of the pillow, right? You want it to be closer to where the zipper is, which is the bottom of the pillow. So I'm going to attach this. I'm going to start probably around here. You don't want to start exactly on the bottom, because then you're going to have, where's my join on here? This one, right? So you can see here how many layers you have already with this join. And if you put this on the bottom where the zipper goes, then you're going to put a zipper over top of that. You're going to have way too much bulk. It makes the zipper a lot harder to open and close. So if you can avoid it, you try to avoid putting a seam, like a seam from the binding, or from the piping, sorry, on the bottom next to the zipper. So in order to avoid that, I'm going to go along the side. So I'll probably start like somewhere around here, and we will go back to the sewing machine, but I can't see any messages. I wonder if it's because this message is pinned. I can see that there are messages, but do I need to? Oh, here we go. Cardamine Green says, "Hey Daniel, love the fabric you picked. Looks really cozy and luxe. Agreed on the test and test mantra." Yeah, for sure. Okay, that was a comment I was missing. Doesn't seem like there are more. Maybe I can expand this a bit. Yeah, okay, here. So we'll leave this chat outside the separate window. Okay, so we'll go back to the machine. So I'm not, I don't want to start on the end again. I want to leave this open so that I have a place to attach the other end, basically, to join it. So I'm going to bring this down maybe about here. And just to make it easier, because I want to have this kind of flap around so it's easier for me to join the two pieces, I'm not going to start like right at the end. I want to start a ways down. So starting from down here. So one thing I didn't mention is that when you attach piping to any kind of fabric, what ends up, you get a tendency that this fabric wants to shrink a bit as you start attaching the piping. And it's usually, most of the time, you're going to be putting piping, you're going to be cutting the fabric on the bias, so this will stretch quite a bit. So what you want to do when you attach piping in order to avoid this from shrinking is you want to pull this bottom fabric a little bit. You're not pulling it away from the machine. It's more just making sure that it's tight and then leaving this one loose. Especially when you cut on the bias, if you stretch this, you don't want to stretch it. But the bottom one, you want to pull it tight. So you can just kind of see how I put my fingers. It's because I'm taking this bottom fabric and I'm trying to pull it this way. And then this one, I'm just kind of letting it rest and using this to kind of guide the piping so that it stays right on the edge. So I'm going to cut this in order to go around the curve. I'm going to cut it right. You know what? I should get my other scissors. Scissors aren't very good. So I'm going to cut this like just before my corner, and then a little bit before that, and then a little bit after. And that way, when I turn this, it'll curve a lot easier. In fact, I can use clips to get this down to kind of show you what that'll look like. And then there we go. And again, that's the whole purpose of that pen mark that we did, is it gives you, you know, a guide to kind of curve this at the same radius on each end, right? So that you're not dealing with like some corners look different than other ones. And then same thing again, pulling the bottom fabric tight while the top stays pretty loose. And it's again cut. Before, a little after. Attach each side, follow the curvature of our pen mark. You don't have to do this. Like, not everybody likes things super precise. They just want a, quick and dirty job. That's fine too. I personally don't like eyeballing things and, doing things quick and dirty. This fabric was actually quite expensive, so don't want to mess it up. So this is where it helps to really have this piping the same width all the way across. You can see here, I kind of cut a piece out. I kind of did that on purpose when I was showing you. And the reason is because if you don't have it, see, like, because it was just such a small piece, I can see like where the beginning was and where the end is. But if this was all kind of jagged along the whole way, and you're trying to line it up with this edge, then like at some parts your piping will be a little bit further out, further in, and you're gonna have, it's not gonna look good. So it just helps to have everything perfectly square, like the fabric that you cut perfectly square, as well as the piping. Just make sure that it's exactly, half an inch or whatever your seam allowance is. So just by luck, by chance, this seam, the join here that we did earlier, happens to be right in the corner, which is kind of perfect actually, because then you won't even notice it. So here we'll just, a lot of times I don't necessarily clip this down, I just use the pen guide, but for the sake of the video, it kind of helps you to see the purpose of it really, right? Like you can see that each corner is exactly the same corner radius. Shoot that. You just don't want to make sure you don't sew over top of the piping of the cord. Not because of your needle or anything like that, just because, well, it's not going to look good. Same thing over and over. Make sure you don't cut off your stitches. You want to go up to the stitches, but not cutting them. Follow the curvature. See, especially when you cut your piping like this, your curvature can really, like the radius can really vary quite a bit. So it really helps to have that pen guide. Okay. So because we're getting close to the join here, I'm just going to sew a tiny bit more, and I'm going to stop. And this is the point where we're going to join both of these together. But in order to do that, let's see if I'm going to check the comments for a second here. Definitely also a member of Team Super Precise usually. Yeah, for sure. There's two kinds of people that like to sew. There's the people that like to sew quick and dirty, and then there's people that like to be super, super, super precise. And super precise can be, I mean, obviously that's what I do. That's what I prefer. But it can be a lot. Like just cutting fabric, for me anyways, takes me a very long time. Because I like to make sure that it's like perfectly on the grain, cut perfectly square. So it's like, it's not the cutting really, it's the measuring over and over. Comparing one selvage edge to the other. It can take a very long time for me to cut fabric. but because of the way I sew, I use my fabric as a guide. So I don't really have to worry so much when I get to the machine. So I'm gonna cut this strip. And the reason I cut it is because I need the width of this. I need this as a measurement. And I'll show you how I'm gonna join these. So I'm gonna join these. It's gonna look exactly like the way that we did the other one. You're not gonna notice the join. I'm not like some people will do this and then they'll have two ends of piping and it comes down, and I think it looks terrible. So I'll show you a much better way. It's harder, but it's looks much better. So here we have our piping. You can see I have one on top of the other. All right, so I have this bottom one, and then I have this top one. And what I'm going to do is use this as a measurement. So my other piping ends, you probably can't see because of the color, but it ends right here on this end. And that's where I'm putting this here to measure exactly where I need to cut this one. The width of this is how much overlap you need. So I'm going to cut this right, I can see there. That right there. This is my scrap. I don't need that. Put it in the bin for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to unpick this. Just pick it open. Need it flat to join it to the other one. The more you unpick, the easier it is, because that way you're not working with like fabric that's attached to something already. But you can, if you unpick way too much, you're gonna be here forever trying to unpick it. So all we do at this point is I put both of these together again at right sides together, and I'm going to sew at an angle. Right, so just sew here. So I'll take this out. I'm going to, let's see. Yeah. That starts there. So just at a 45-degree angle here. Right end. Cut the excess off. It's garbage. And now you can see that this is perfectly joined at an angle. I'm going to press this, just finger press it open, and voila. So don't even notice it. When we, obviously we're going to join these together, right? So you won't even see the seam there, and all the way around looks continuous. You'd have to really look for it to find that seam. So I'm just going to grab these. I'm going to trim them maybe like right around the seam. So that's the length we need. One last thing is I'm going to grab some masking tape and just tape them together. Depending on what kind of piping you use, you might not have to do this. Like if you use like a foam piping, a lot of times, I don't know, maybe that's when people do it the most. I don't see the need to do it when it's like foam piping. But for this, it's just easier. It looks better from the outside when you do it. There we go, I'm just rolling it around a bit. My bad scissors. It's good for tape, not for fabric. There we go, so we have this, tuck it in there, and then we can continue with closing this, or sewing, attaching it to the pillow. So I do have, so this is open. Let's go over a bit. And there we go. I'll go back to the table and I'll show you from here. There we go. So from here you can see cutting can take a whole afternoon evening as well. The sewing world often doesn't talk enough about how long cutting can take. Yeah, cutting can take forever. It can take a very long time. Okay, I'm just cleaning up a bit. So here we go. So this is it. One of our joins was in the corner, if you remember. It was this corner. So when you look super carefully, you can kind of see, like right along here, there's the join. But for the most part, like who's going to see that? You're not going to see that there's a join. It looks seamless. And then the other join was the one that we just did. See, like if I'm having this hard of a time trying to find it, then you know it's pretty good. Where? Here? Yeah, there we go. Here it is. That's pretty seamless, right? Like you see here, I'll do it this way, right? From the inside of the pillow, which is this side here, you're not going to see that join. Like it's right here. Yeah, it is a neat finish. So you see here, like that's where you see your join. You're not going to find that. You're not going to see it. And because the join of the cable cord is like right on the seam too, you don't see it at all. So here we go, and you can see that this actually lays pretty flat, even with the piping attached. That's what you want. When I first started doing these pillows, like you'd see that this would shrink quite a bit. It was kind of difficult to attach it to the other one. But now with experience, that's why you pull. You don't want to pull the fabric necessarily. You just want to make sure that it's nice and tight so that when you're attaching the piping to it, it's perfectly flat and even. So what is that? That is really neat finish. Okay, that was the last one. Cool. Okay, so now that we've done the piping, we're going to do the zipper. But in order to do the zipper, I need to overlock or serge this bottom edge here. So this edge here is going to be, what does that say? We'll steal the tape trick too, by the way. I did not know about that one. Yeah, I've seen a whole bunch of YouTube videos, and I found that one on YouTube about taping the cable cord together. So I'm going to serge this end here. I'm going to grab the other end of my fabric, and I'm also going to serge the bottom of this, serge, overlock, whatever you call it. I'm going to mark this too so that I lose track. And yeah, this is the bottom. Okay. So we will go over to serger. Let's see. Oh, that's not the right. Let's see. We want this one for now. Just trying to give you it's actually a security camera view. There we go. See my sewing room. So just take this over here, set up my chair. Don't want to fall. And we'll go over to overlock it. So again, set up, test, right? Machines don't come set up. You got to set them up. You got to test with your fabric. So when I overlock this, I'm trying not to cut off anything really, because I've already measured this exactly 21 inches. So the less I cut off, the less I cut off, the better. So I'm just gonna go like super slow to make sure that I'm just like butting it up right against the edge of the knife, but not actually trying to cut anything off. go. There's the bottom. And here's my other piece. Same thing with this one, right? Because I already have my 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm trying not to cut anything off, which for the most part means I'm just pushing the piping right up against the foot as far as it'll go. But that's because this foot is like 1/2 inch. Here we go. This is nicely overlocked. And I'll show you this one. Another one. Very nice. So now it's ready for zipper. So the zipper again is nothing complicated, nothing difficult. Once you know. So I shouldn't say it's not difficult. I should say it's not difficult once you know. Okay. So, okay. Looking for, here we go, my pen. Okay, I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna line it up. You can see the numbers down here. Yeah, see down here. With 20, and we'll go all the way to 41. Now, it makes it off center on the camera for you. I mean, I could maybe go 30. Yeah, 30 is a little better. It's just because it makes the math a lot easier. So I'm making sure that because this is 21 inches, it's a 20-inch pillow, 1/2 inch seam allowance on each side, so it should fit perfectly between 30 and 51, which it does. I'm going to take my invisible ink pen and I'm going to mark 2 inches from each side. And then I want to mark the halfway point, which on this will be 40.5, right? Okay, so I have my 2 ends at 2 inches, and then this marked at 40.5. Move that out of the way. Do exactly the same thing on this piece here. Line it up with 30 and 51. Only because I'm working in the middle of the table, you could mark it, like line it up with 0 and 20. That doesn't make a difference. It's just for the math, it's easier for me to, I mean, 2 inches from each end. It's not hard. That's no math there. But just to do the math to say 40.5, right? It just makes it rounder numbers and easier to work with. Rather than, you know, me moving this over and saying, okay, my halfway mark is 32.5. Like, how did you come up with that? Right? So there we go. So I've marked 2 inches from each corner, and then the halfway mark. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing with my zipper. So again, line this up to 30. So this is a 24-inch zipper. It's obviously a lot longer than the pillow, but even longer than what we need. And the reasoning behind that is a lot of times when you're sewing on a zipper, you have to sew around this zipper pull, right? So you're sewing here, and then you know it's like it's in the way, and how do you exactly, like, you can't get it perfect. You can't sew around it. Even if you sit there and say, okay, well, I'll sew around that part, and then I move this, and I can, you know, you got to like zip and unzip the zipper pull to get it out of the way. So what I do is I get a zipper that's much longer. That way I can pull the zipper pull all the way off the end. So when I'm attaching my zipper, I'm actually attaching it here. And then when I'm sewing here, I never have to worry about the zipper pull because it's like way off on the other end. So if you get a longer zipper than you need, then you have room on the other end for your zipper pull. So, little tip there. I'm going to mark here 1 inch off the end of this edge. Just lining it up with the cutting mat. Okay. one of these. Get this out of the way. That's better for you. Okay, I'm trying to line it up for the video. Okay, so now this end here will attach here, right? Because I got my line here, that's going to line up. So all I need to do is mark on my zipper my other two lines. So here, half. This one here lines up with this. You can verify, make sure that this lines up with the cutting mat, not just with the mines. I mean, it's measurements. Okay, so now we attach the zipper. I like to use basting tape. There's obviously many ways to attach a zipper. And I have this basting tape. This one is not, it's not Wonder Tape. So like Wonder Tape is good for not gumming up your needle. You can sew right through it, what comes out in the wash. This stuff is more for like leather and leather, I guess, yeah, mostly for leather. I use it anyway, because I do some other leather stuff anyway. But this will gum up your needle. So this is why I like to buy, like my zipper is a YKK number 3 zipper, which means that the tape is exactly 1 inch wide, or just under. And which means that each side of the tape is ½ inch. Because my basting tape is narrower than my zipper, I just make sure that I give myself enough room to sew on each end of it without hitting the basting tape. That way it doesn't gum up my needle. It's not the end of the world if you sew through it. But just when I attach, I make sure that I give myself room to sew on either side of it. So basting tape here. I watched a lot of YouTube videos, and when I'd see people taking their basting tape, and they would just like rip it off, it always bugged me. I'd be like, well, you got like scissors right next to you. Why don't you just cut it off? Right? Like here you are, you know, like, I don't know. I used to cut it, and then I found out there's actually a reason for it. And the reason for it is if you cut this, I'm going to show you in a second here. If you cut this with scissors, then when it comes time to pulling off this, because it's basically double-sided tape, if you cut it with scissors, and when it comes time to pulling this off, you got to sit there and like pick at it for like the longest time and try to figure out like how to get it. But when it's just ripped off, you see, just like, there you go, this comes right off. So that's the reason that you break it off with your hands instead, because you don't want the edges to be imperfect. Just because it makes this part a lot easier, like ripping that off. Small little things. Okay, so I'm going to open this. Line up my lines. Try not to stretch the zipper. I stretched a bit. Take your own advice, right? There we go. Nice. Everything lines up. So if you're going to attach this, I've seen people do all kinds of sorts of weird things, like they twist this once, or they twist, oh man, don't do that. That's just weird. Just do it this way. Take this piece, put it right sides together, and then flip this just a little bit, pull it closer, and this will attach right there. You don't need a fold or a twist, or you don't have to worry about that stuff after. Because a lot of times if you try to do this the other way, like if you have this like this, now your teeth are on the wrong side, so then you have to worry about twisting it, but then this is upside down, so you gotta, I don't know, do gymnastics, weird stuff. So just put this down, face down, flip this over, bring it closer, keep your zipper straight, and this attaches right there. Easy. Nice. Do you need basting tape? No. Is it nice to have? Yes. Somebody asked that comment. No, but I'm saying it anyway. Here we go. Okay, we're just trying to watch and sew binding at the same time. It's not working out. Yeah, you can always replay this video too after it's done. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do when I get to the machine is I'm not gonna worry about sewing the invisible zipper part, like where the zipper teeth are. If you don't have basting tape, that's where this gets easier, because the first step you should actually do is attach your zipper to the pillow. So if you attach it on this side, then you don't have to worry about like whether the teeth are straight or not, whether they're, you know, whether you're getting it close enough to the teeth. You're just worrying about attaching this, making sure that everything lines up, and then after you can worry about the teeth. So first thing is I'll take the edges and I'll attach the edges, and once the edges are attached, then we can worry about getting close to the zipper teeth. There we go. So we will switch this foot to a zipper foot. Not an invisible zipper foot, just a regular zipper foot. And I'm just attaching this here from one end, from one line to the other line, one end to the other end. Like not on the edge of the tape, but just on the lines, like the lines that I drew, sorry. Nice. Do the same thing again with this one. The line that I drew to the other line that I drew. Back tack and at the beginning and the end, right? This machine, I have it set up to do it for me automatically when I start and stop. So there we go. Now for this side, I'm going to switch to an invisible zipper foot, which looks like this. Where's the camera? This way. This is really hard. There we go. Right. So it looks like that on the bottom. Looks like this from the front. Wrong way. Backwards. Right? Okay. Invisible zipper foot. Red tail, cut it off. So I like to roll this open, start at the line that I drew, and you're just taking the tape and rolling it open. Stupid. Let's forget. Is that okay? That might not be okay. We'll see. This sewing machine has like a clamp up on this side, and the clamp grabs a thread so I don't have to hang on to my threads. It's also for, it's got a suction. I got the vacuum turned off right now, so that when it trims the threads, it gets super, super short thread tails, like you don't have to cut them off after. But the downside to this clamp, which you can turn off, I just don't like to, is that when I start sewing, like most sewing, like this standard sewing foot actually has like a little cutter in it, so that it cuts the thread, and that way it doesn't matter, but these ones obviously don't. So it'll just hold my thread, and then that's why you see a lot of times like it's, it looks like my fabric is bunching up in the back because this clamp is holding it, so you just release the thread. But that's okay. I'm gonna get my thread tail. Got stuck under there. Yeah, we're okay. We might have a little bit of trouble opening and closing the zipper, and if we do, we'll have to fix it. But if we don't, then we don't. So now, I can't use an invisible zipper on this side because of the piping, right? There's no way that I'm gonna get this sewing the teeth in there, and then this is gonna be like riding on top of the piping and stuff. It's just it's too difficult. So we just switched to a regular zipper foot. Find it. Nope. Oh. And here I just take the zipper teeth, just push it up against the piping, sew from end to end. So I'm holding this, I'm rolling this zipper tape open as I push the piping on this side up against the foot so I can get nice and close to it. Here we go. Go back to table so I can show you what I've done. So this is, turn it this way. Here's the zipper. Now is the moment of truth where we test it. Make sure it works. Make sure it opens and closes easily. Yeah, that's what I thought. It's gonna have a hard time because of what I did there in the beginning. It's like one stitch that I could feel it because I didn't grab that thread. It's this one here, I can see it. So this is like always a trade-off, right? Is it possible to sew? A lot of people trying to sew really close to the zipper teeth on an invisible zipper to make it invisible, but it is actually possible to sew too close, as you can see, because then the foot just kind of gets stuck. But also, this is not a regular invisible zipper. Like, it's not a invisible zipper that you would use for a dress. A dress zipper, I think, is like a number 2 zipper. So it's a lot lighter weight. It's a little bit, it's not as wide. And it wouldn't be able to, like, if you try to put an invisible zipper, like a dress invisible zipper, into a throw pillow, especially with fabric that's like very thick and heavy like this, yeah, have fun. Have fun trying to zip it. Not a good idea. Been there, done that. So you need a heavier zipper. Like, I've even tried before with number 5 invisible zippers, which is what they use like on wedding dresses and stuff. And those are overkill for throw pillows. Sometimes if you brute force it, if it's a good zipper, it like I'm doing here, it helps you to close it. You can see it's gonna look nice. Sometimes this just helps to like loosen it a bit, and then after this, then it'll actually open and close a lot easier with your hands. I'm not very strong. Had surgery on this wrist and problems with both arms. So for me, like, it might look like I'm using a lot of force for this zipper, but I assure you it's not a lot of force. It just looks like it because I'm super, super, super weak. So probably like what your normal hand force would be is like how much, right? I need this thing, pliers. Not because like the zipper's bad, but because my hands are very weak. My fingers, right? Like that's why I shake a lot. But you can see like the zipper does open and close quite easily for most people. For me, I need this. So good, it works, right? We tested it. We'll try to, I forgot. I want to actually close this halfway. Let's see, now I can do it. Pliers help loosen it a bit. But you can see here how it's going to look. Like, that's already from here. That's a pretty invisible zipper. Interesting zipper lore. I did not know that. I did not know about what the different zipper sizes. But yeah, you see, like here, you can see that the piping is already going to cover. You don't even see, like, you barely see where the zipper is. If I like try to pull it apart, you can kind of see that. There you go. Right, but for the most part, like, this piping just covers it. So it's a balance, right? You want to make sure that your zipper is nice and close to the piping so that it hides it. But on the other hand, if you get it too close, then it's going to be too hard to open and close your zipper, right? You might have to unstitch it, do it again. That's why you test. In this case, I know that it's not the zipper that's tight. I know it's just me because, and I did like a test one, the one I showed you when I started the video. It was the same thing. And then when my wife came home, I gave her the pillow and I asked her to open and close it. She's just like, zip, zip. And I'm like, okay, so it is just me, right? It's because my muscles are super, super weak. Okay, so I'm just trying to get this to the halfway point. You'd watch a guy struggle so much with the zipper. But I assure you it's not because the installation is bad. It really is me. Okay, so now we're ready to close the pillow. I don't like to remove the excess tape yet, and the reason for that is because we got to sew like around here. We're sewing up to that line where the tape is attached, and if I cut this, then the zipper tape will be like this on the end, right? And then it doesn't really, like, you have to like see how it moves. And when you're trying to do that when you're sewing on, it's too hard. It's complicated. Whereas this way, it gives me something to hang on to pull, so that I can get this zipper out of the way and get just around where I need to get. If I cut this off and I do it right now, then, like, we're going to do it later, but if I do it now, then it's not going to give me something to hang on to. But I also want it out of the way. So just going to clip it there for now. And then clip 4 corners. So one corner. I like to put 2 on each end. And then I will do 1 in the middle. Yeah, that's good. I'll start on this one. Same thing. I'm going to line it up. It should be straight and square. Nice and flat. Line up the edges. Same thing here. Line up. Clip. Here. One there. In the middle. Sits nice and flat. So because of the way feed dogs work on sewing machines, and maybe that's why, maybe it's just because of experience, you want to sew this, you want to sew it twice. You want to sew it once from this side and then once from this side. But the first time you want the piping side, the side that you attach the piping to, you want that side up. And the side that doesn't have the piping, you want to leave that down. Just because of the way, like, the fabric works, sometimes it especially when you sew the piping and the top piece ends up being a little bit smaller, it helps if you sew it this way. It makes it, you know, obviously the feed dogs pull the bottom fabric a little bit more than they do the top, unless you have a walking foot machine. But just from experience, it's better if you sew with this piping side up. Plus, if you have, like, you know, in this, you can barely see the thread, but when you get to the machine, I can see it. And it kind of gives you a little bit of a guide to know exactly where the piping is, so that you can sew along the thread. Whereas on this side, there's nothing sewn yet. But we are going to sew it twice. The only other thing is, when you sew around the corners, if anything, what you want to do is you want to undershoot the corners. So the last thing you want to do is sew over top of your piping, because then when you flip it inside out, you're going to see that the piping looks nice and full everywhere, except for in the corners. It's going to look like it's very thin. So I like to kind of undershoot it, and then the downside to that is then it looks like you didn't get close enough to the piping. But the first time, if you undershoot it, then the second time you won't. Whereas if you overshoot it and you sew some of your piping, then you're going to unpick that, and then you're going to have to fix it, and then unpicking takes a lot longer. So just, you know, try to undershoot it, if anything, not overshoot it, so that you don't sew on top of the cord, and then the second time when you go from the other side, you'll probably get it a lot better. What did she say? Agreed. That's really neat and tidy. The zipper looks so neat, really invisible. Yeah. Interesting zipper. I did not know that. Yeah. Okay, cool. So here, we're going to go back to this machine. Oh, one other thing. I have this attachment on here, which is good for switching feet, like, really quick. But I'll show you for this last part, you don't want to use that. I don't want to use it. And the reason is, I'm going to put it on so you can see. That because I got to get up close to the zipper, this has a tendency, because of, like, the way it's designed, that it's easier for it to move. And I need to make sure that this doesn't move, because then, like, it'll break my needle, right? There's no hole for the needle to go through. So for this last part, I can't use this attachment that's just like a spring It's quick. It's good for most stuff. It's good for switching feet in a hurry. But for this part, no good. So I'll just use a regular screw for this part. Okay. It's just this is an extra long screw. I can't remember why I needed it. Oh, I remember why. Because I have a seam guide that attaches to here, and it takes up space, so you need an extra long screw for that. I have another one, but like a shorter screw, but this was handy. Okay, so piping side up. I'm going to grab a pen. I can see here, but obviously because of the light and the color, you can't see, but I can see where the lines are. Like on here, you can see where the lines are. But I can see where I started and stopped because of the back tacking. So I'm just gonna mark that on here so you can see that's like that's the point that I'm going up to, is the point that I attached the zipper, the part that I back tacked. So this zipper's here. Yeah. So I'm going up to here. It'll help you see, like I can see it. It is actually a little bit hard even for me to see because the back tacking it's so nice on this machine. It's kind of hard to see, but that's the point that I'm starting and stopping from, up to the point where that zipper line was. Where's my line? Okay, here we go. Just going super slow, taking my time around those corners. Trying to undershoot it, because it's nothing worse than sewing over top of the cord and then having to redo it or unpick it. So one of the downsides of having a sewing machine up against the wall is that when you're sewing up the wall, the fabric can start to hit the wall, and then it can put your stuff out of line a little bit. So you just have to stay on top of it. Remember to, with light fabrics, it doesn't matter, it'll just go over the edge. Because this stuff is like it's obviously very thick and very dense. So it just like runs into the wall, and then it just kind of like it stays there, and then it starts affecting everything up here. See, it starts to bunch up. I don't know if you can see the back there. I used to do this a lot quicker. Just go around you know, not like just pretty smooth around the corners. And every time I do that, I regret it. I think I'm getting better. I should be able to do it, but it's just don't do it. When I say I regret it is because I end up having to unpick the corner sometimes, and I hate having to do that. So hopefully I don't have to do that this time. Okay, there's my zipper. Okay, this is where this comes in handy. See, I can pull this, whereas if I had cut it, I don't really have anything to hang on to, and this helps me to pull it out of the way to get right up against the piping in there. There we go. Let's have a look. So let's see first if there's any comments. Unpicking is the worst. I will do it, but it is zero fun. Yeah, nobody likes unpicking because you're like going, you're working, and it's like, then all of a sudden you feel like there goes all your momentum. You got to stop to unpick. No fun. But I actually do, when I put zippers in, I'll baste them sometimes with thread, and then you just unpick it because you get better results that way. So I'm not like opposed to unpicking. If I don't have to, just like everyone, I'd rather not, right? So here, I'm just gonna flip this inside out, have a look. Remember, we're gonna go through for a second pass. So I'm not expecting that this is perfect. But that's why I'm trying to undershoot it, because then when I flip this through, I can see, you know, if there's any problem areas that I need to reinforce, if there's parts that, you know, maybe we've been talking about it so much, I need to unpick. If there's anything, you know, weird going on, I want to go over it a second time and then have to unpick it twice, right? Unpicking 2 sets of stitches is worse than unpicking 1 set of stitches. So I like to check it, see if there's anything weird going on, anything I missed or overshot or undershot, and then from there do a second pass. Sometimes with the second pass you can address some of those issues. Sometimes you just use a zipper foot and like reinforce corners if you have to. Let's see, table. Can you see this? So here's one corner. Looks pretty good. It's not pulling in the piping or anything. The full width of the piping is there. That's what we want. Go through, check it all. Looks good. Very even, very nice and full piping. Like it's not, you know, depending on the kind of piping you use, it can be easy to sew over top of it. Like foam piping, obviously not. But this kind of piping, because it's so thin and small, and it's basically like cloth, it's very easy to sew over top of it. But yeah, these look nice. All of them, nice and full. Nice corners. And then this is, oh, that's not the zipper side. This is also nice and full. And here, yeah, that's the side with the zipper. Looks pretty good to me. So we'll just take this, do a second pass, and I think that's it. I think we're done after that. Oh, we're gonna stuff the pillow. Oh, and we gotta overlock it. Can't leave the edges unfinished. Just when you think you're done, you're getting all excited. You're like, yeah, okay, I'm done. I'm just gonna do one more pass. No, it's one more step, one more step. That's okay. Corners look really professional. Thank you. They do look good, I think. Okay, so just for good measure, we're gonna go do a second pass, and this time from the other side. So this time from this side will be up, and go back over there to do it. Here we go. So same thing again. I'll mark start and stop. This is like a third hand, so I don't have to hold onto my threads. But then when I use my domestic machine, I forget to hold my threads because I'm so used to using this. Yeah, this is the tricky part, is getting this under here. I've been meaning to adjust this machine to get the presser foot to come up a little higher. I don't have it set that way right now, so it's kind of hard to get it under there. This is like super thick upholstery fabric though, so you usually wouldn't run into this. And this is not a heavy duty machine. It's more for clothing. It can do it. It's doing it. But it's not a walking foot machine. Those are, well, depending on what you sew, I guess. I wouldn't mind having a walking foot machine. For throw pillows and dog beds and upholstery type things. But as you can see from my room, I have no room for it. Nice and slow. Last thing I want to do is sew over that cord now that I've done my first pass so well. There we go. They say you should never sew when you're angry. Just like cooking, right? Never cook when you're angry because it won't come out good. And I mention that only because when I started this live stream, I started pretty upset because my software wasn't working properly. I'd spent all this time setting up these keyboard shortcuts, and then it wasn't working. So I'd have to change cameras with a mouse, and that's just not, it just takes too long. And what was the point of setting up all those keyboard shortcuts? I was pretty angry, and that was the first thought I had when I sat down when I was making the piping, is like, oh, you're not supposed to sew when you're angry, but what choice do I have? And I managed to fix it. It fixes itself, I guess. I think it was because of the chat. The chat was messing up, and it was conflicting with the other part of the software, I guess. Now we check. Oh, sorry, here. So yeah, when I started this, I was pretty upset. I was like, oh man, I spent all this time setting up keyboard shortcuts, getting everything ready, testing everything out, only for it to like not work right when it's showtime. But the one thing I didn't really test was is the live comments. Because when you do a private live stream on YouTube, which is what I was doing, so that it's not, public, because it was just for like tests or whatever to make sure the software was working. When you do private ones, the comments are disabled, so I wasn't able to test the comments. Go. That, ladies and gentlemen, is our pillow. So, again, I go through the whole thing. See, this is where the zipper would end. You see that? Again, didn't overshoot that. Nice corners. Right through the full width of it. Nice and full. Corners don't look weird. This one is maybe a little weird. Yeah, maybe on this side a little bit. I can open it up and see if I need to fix that, or if it's, is it just me? It's just me. Oh, maybe I can fix it a bit. This side. 10 out of 10 pillow. I definitely buy or make that. Thank you. I've made a lot of pillows. I've made too many pillows. Pillow covers. That's why I felt comfortable making this my first live stream. I don't want to sew something brand new that I've never done before. And people will be like, what are you doing, guy? So let's check out that corner. It was either this one. Yeah, a little bit. I can see this that I had. Oh, sorry. So I can see on this corner here. I don't know if you'll be able to see that because it's so. I need a. I'll use. I'll use an awl so I can point it out. Was it this corner? I think it was this one. Oh, if I can't find it, then it's just me. There we go. It's this one. Yeah. Okay. If you can see the line of stitching there, it's very hard to see. But there's two lines of stitching. And if you see the one that's closer to the inside, I kind of sewed over top of the piping a little bit. We're talking about like a 32nd of an inch, or like maybe even a 16th of an inch. It's not a lot, but it's enough that I was able to notice it on that corner when I flipped it inside out. Is that the right one? See, because if you can't see it yourself on the inside, then sometimes it can just be you, right? Like, trying to be picky, trying to get things right. But if you're gonna bother to unpick something and redo it that no one's ever gonna see, only you're gonna see it, then sometimes it's not worth it. Okay, so I think it's this corner. I'm gonna check. So I think it's the corner with the zipper that's closed, with the zipper closed. So I'm just gonna pull this out again and check. And if it is, like I think, yeah, see, it is this one. Yeah, just by a little bit. So in here, you can see just by a little bit, I went over top of that cord. Because it's at the bottom, no one's ever gonna see that. I know I'm being like, I'm telling you, it's like a 32nd of an inch or a 16th of an inch, and the perfectionist in me wants to go and unpick it and redo it, but no one's ever gonna see it. So I'm not gonna make you go through that. Just finish it, because really I know I'm being too picky at that point. Happens. Okay, so we're just gonna overlock the pillow and we'll be done. Actually, before we overlock, I'll talk about, so good thing I didn't, because now I was going to cut off the zipper. Finally, this is the fun part, because you get to play with fire. So take the zipper. I don't know if you can see my lines on the zipper. And just gonna make it a little bit longer than that. Cut it off, and I get to play with fire and burn the edge. There we go. And then I like to burn the plastic a little bit, just in case if someone somehow manages to pull the zipper past the stitch line, which I don't know how you would ever do that. There we go. That hurts a lot. I burnt myself. The plastic. Okay, so I like to burn just the end of the plastic of the teeth. The zipper only zips up to like an inch before that, so we don't have to worry. But I like to do it. Better safe than sorry. There we go. We remove that. Now we can overlock. I'm going to start at the top here. And then here, I'm going to start at the top. And then I'm going to go around and then end on this end. So, what am I trying to say? The ends here, like we had, if you're sorry about that, you remember I'd cut these, and I've never been worried about that because we're going to overlock it. So the overlocker will go around in a curve. It'll take all of that off. It'll, overlock those edges so they don't fray. And then the same thing up on the top, we're going to overlock it in a curve. And that's why we need to cut the zipper at that point, because we need that to be free. So I'm going to start actually, I'm not starting on the edge here, right? I'm starting on the curve. So I'm going to start from up here so that I can go around this way and curve all the way around. And then from here, I don't go straight and cut like all the way to the end. I'm actually going to curve it. And then I stop like up here. And then the thread tails, we just tuck in. So I'll do that now. Okay. Just move my bench. So yeah, starting here, not on the end, right? I can see my line of where my zipper will end up stopping, so I'm just going to go a little bit before that. And then for the end, obviously I don't care about the seam allowance anymore. That's done. We're done sewing it. But I'm going to try to keep the stitches here in the middle of my foot, which means that the piping will ride just under the foot. Unfortunately, I can't go with the foot up against here. I have to ride the foot on top of the piping a bit in order to get it where I want. So if you have a domestic serger, you can still do this. It might mess up your stitches a bit to not have the foot totally level, because you are going on top of the piping. So it might not be fun, or you might have a hard time doing it. Luckily, I have this industrial one, so it handles quite a bit. And sorry, my other point was if you have a domestic serger, you might not be able to do fabric this thick, depending on your serger, because we got like 4 layers here of like super thick fabric. And if it is able to do it, no way are you going to go this fast. Like, go slow, go very slow. I used to have a domestic serger, so I know what it could handle and what it couldn't. It was a good one. It was a Juki MO654DE, if that model means anything to you. There we go. Again, I'm going slow around the corners because the last thing I want to do is, take off some of the piping or even sew over top of that piping in any way. We just spent so much time trying to get it perfect and right up against it, only to then, mess up the corner in the last step. Don't want to do that. Yeah, look at that. Looks nice. Let's cut that off. Okay. This will be gone. Oh, I forgot to turn that off. That's going to be tricky now. I think we can still do it. I was going to turn off the cutting on the serger to not cut off my thread ends, because I need them long to be able to tuck them into the corner, and I forgot to turn it off. So, yeah, this is still long. That's still long enough. Yeah, see, because I left them long. That's good. So I'm just going to take this thread tail from the serger and tuck it in. Where's this been? What a good finish on those corners. Yeah, we'll look at that in a sec. I'll show you the corners once we tuck these in. Okay, there's one. And then just be easier for me to do it this way because I'm right-handed. Sometimes my hands shake a lot. Today they're being good, so this isn't taking an eternity. It's still taking longer than I'd like, but it's okay. You don't have to get all 4 threads in there. You can get 2, and then the others will come for the ride. There we go. One last thing I like to do is put some spray check on the ends just to seal it. Make sure it doesn't come out ever. Go. So now let's have a look on the inside. People who so appreciate the inside. Most people don't show you that in the video. I don't know why, right? So here we go. Look at those corners, look at those edges. Yeah, that looks nice. On the inside, this is the inside, don't forget, right? The inside looks pretty good. Look at that curve. Makes for a very nice pillow. And then once we turn it inside out, we're golden. Still need my hand. One, two, three. Man, I can't believe how thick this fabric is, how heavy it is. And 4. Guess I can do 4 like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Look at that. And if we measure, and go again from 30 to 50, exactly 20 inches from here to there. Also 20 inches exactly. Perfect. That looks weird because the zipper's half open. Yeah, see, I can kind of do it. Hurts my wrist a bit. Yeah, see, you'll never get to the end of the zipper, so you never have to worry about the fact that we cut it or anything. You don't need zipper stops. So the only thing left to do is to stuff it. So I'm gonna grab this other pillow, and there you go, it's done. No, I'm kidding. I'm gonna take it out so we can see what it looks like. Yeah, see, this one's tough too for me. So there's our pillow form. This is a very puffy, overfilled pillow form. Depends on how you like your pillows. Perfect measurement, symmetry makes my brain happy. Yeah. So it depends on how you like your pillow form. Some people like, super big, puffy pillows. Some people like their pillows to be more squishy. I kind of like somewhere in the middle, I think. But this one just happens to be like a super overstuffed pillow form, which I made actually. I had extra batting left over from a dog bed because I purposely fill the dog bed insert too much so that I could open it and use some of that filling for pillows. So I made this this pillow for myself, and I measured, what was it? At first I had 750 grams of stuffing in it, and that was too much. So I ended up going to 700, and that was still a little bit too much, so I think I went down to 680. And I don't know, it's still a lot. Oh, you know what I forgot to do is I forgot to fill the corners. See, this corner's a little bit not that full compared to some of the other ones. So you just gotta massage the pillow form to fill the corners. Just gonna get the stuffing into the corners. You want to separate it from the middle a little bit. There we go. See, that's gonna look better. And then here. Yeah. a little bit fuller corners now. You just play with the stuffing. Obviously, it's gonna shift and move around, especially over time. And that was my thinking with leaving this at 680 grams of stuffing, was that maybe over time it might squish a bit. It might look better over time. But also, I think the person I'm making these are for my mom, actually. I think she likes really big. She wanted, like, I usually don't make 20-inch pillows. I don't make pillows this big. I usually make like 16 or 18. But she wanted 20-inch pillows, so I figured she'd want them stuffed a lot too. So that's why I left it that way. I would probably do it less for me. But there you go. I'm losing my breath just stuffing a pillow. You don't realize how much work it can be. So there we go. There's the pillow. 20-inch pillow. Same on all sides. And then now that it's full, you know, I can show you this and be like, here, take a guess. Actually, let's go back to this camera here. Take a guess, like where's the zipper? Is it on that side? Is it on that side? Side 2? On side 3? Or is it on side 4? I just gave it away. There you go, that's the side of the zipper. Right? You can't really see because the piping is covering. Like if you didn't see the zipper pull, you would never know. Like that, you know, it's like, okay, it's not there. And then you look at this and you're like, yeah, it's not there either. Where's the zipper? It's not there either. And then the zipper pull there gives it away. But if I didn't show you the zipper pull and I started here, it looks the same as the other ones. You can't see it anywhere. So that's when you know you did a good job. So there you go. There's our throw pillow with an invisible zipper next to welt cord. It's all done. So thanks to everybody who watched today, and for those also that are going to watch the replay of the live stream. There's this comment before we go. It's honestly impossible to see where the zipper is, except for the zipper pull. Yeah, it is, right? That's how you know you did a good job. Because even I had a hard time finding it. It was the zipper pull that gave it away. So now you know how I did it. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Tried to be entertaining. Not really much of a talker, so yeah. And the dogs were here. I'll show you the dogs again. They're still in the corner. See, sitting by the window. They're happy. They're good. They're special guests. So this is me signing off. Thank you very much for watching. And what did she say? Congrats on your first live stream. This was great. Awesome. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys. That's it.